Howdy. Good Saturday morning to those of you in my time zone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're watching live from. Yeah, doing an early morning show. I almost said evening because, yeah, my sleep's a little screwed up. Welcome everybody. I am going to be doing a review, not surprisingly, of some Darth Dawkins content that Tom Rabbit was nice enough to curate for everyone. And recently, Darth Dawkins has had a couple conversations with a Clubhouse member named C'est and she is a Christian, I think. She's definitely a theist. As far as I know, she's a Christian. But she seems to take issue with the way Darth presents himself and communicates. And my guess is probably with most things that Darth thinks and says. So, this one's pretty straightforward, 24 minutes. I don't think this one's going to be that long. I'm just going to be watching this one. Darth kind of, it'll be easier to comment on once I get to it. There's really nothing more to say about this, but Tom's little kind of catchphrase for it was Darth, stop trying to control me, which is kind of towards the end, but it's pretty obvious that Darth in this conversation, I mean, he's always trying to like railroad people with certain, badgering them and playing hostile prosecutor, for whatever reason. Well, I think we know the reason because he's an insecure weirdo. But it's odd. It's not odd to see him do it to other Christians, but it is odd to see him do it with other Christians to the extent to the same extent that he does this to non-believers, skeptics, atheists, those obnoxious reprobates, that kind of stuff. I had been looking into some of the other content that's come out, and I've kind of missed some of it. This I think is kind of the first thing to happen that Tom's released or anybody else has released that's been sort of this post Darth praise, a little bit of drama. There was some stuff going on with Darth and James is Tired that I watched a little bit of, and there really isn't too much there. So I haven't really covered that. I might cover one of the videos, like one of the last videos in it, because I thought it was weird. I think it's like the last kind of collected conversation from him, between him and James is Tired. And it's just a really strange moment. And Darth is kind of, there's almost a theme between that last one, which I thought was weird. And maybe it was just me, but it kind of carried over to this one with C'est la vie, where he's sort of blaming Christians that don't agree with him for siding with the atheists. Like if they're not completely on board Team Darth, they are letting the Nazis go free or whatever, like whatever crazy analogy he'd probably want to draw. So anyway, that being said, I'll quit rambling. Welcome to Michael Deaton, algorithm, if you're still here. Dark controlling. Whoa, this will be controversial. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I felt like the title was a little too on the nose, but I had that screenshot of Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. It just seemed to work. Let's see. Thank you guys for showing up. Scuba Diver, welcome. He's from the UK. Thank you for joining. AJ, thank you for being here. Let's see. That guy, welcome. Spooky Bat Hair. Hello. Maria McIntyre, good morning. Nice to see you. Clive Gordon, good to see you. Manny Perez. The condescension to his female interlocutor at the end is pretty egregious on this one. Cringe City. Yes, it is, which is why I'm covering it. So, peace out. I love hearing how old are you. Yeah, no kidding. That never gets old. Hogtouch. I was just listening to Ozzy versus Matt Yester. Weird short shouting match. Yeah, I started watching a little bit of that while I was setting up, and holy crap! Like they're talking about substance dualism and monism and things like that kind of briefly. And I think I made it like while I was setting up, maybe 3 minutes into it. Matt's already getting kind of out of control. Good morning, Hogtie. Digital Hammurabi, welcome. Good morning, everyone listening while I drive. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot you got that early morning commute. So appreciate it. My guess is that is Dr. Josh. I think he usually listens to this during his morning commute, or he's like looking, checking out YouTube for things to keep him awake at the wheel. Jadis Tucker can't sleep, so I figured a dose of Darth is just what the morning calls for. Well, yeah, I mean, now you're going to be, hopefully this doesn't send you spiraling too quickly, Tucker. Otherwise, you're not getting back to sleep. Joseph, good to see you. Devious Chris, evening from Oz. Welcome. Yeah. Always good to see people from the UK and Australia here. And Benghazi. How much money do you need to be given to make a potato croquette, blood sausage, and B-Rock mukbang? Oh, God. What is B-Rock? I'm going to have to Google that. I don't know what that is. What is that? German stuffed rolls? Oh, those look delicious. I don't know. My guess is I would screw up all of those. But you just want me to eat them. I don't know that you'd have to pay me for that. All of that stuff is delicious. Yeah. If you know good sources for those particular foods, I'll go for it. Blood sausage is hard to find where I live. And yeah, I'm a weirdo. I've looked. Spoiler, it's all Ozzy's fault because Ozzy has an uncontrollable temper. Yeah, in the other video. Yeah. No, that's kind of what I was. It seemed like that's what Matt was working up to. Yeah, exactly. Randolph, good to see you. Cody, Joseph Rivero, good to see you guys. Okay, well, I think that's good. Good morning to all of you who have joined me live. I'm surprised this many are here live because this is a weird time. Early Saturday, it's kind of stupid. But, for anybody that's watching in UK or in Australia, this is either this evening or tomorrow. So I guess it kind of depends on what side of Australia you're on. But anyway, yeah, let's get this started. So we're going to start right off from the top. I'm going to keep this at normal speed. Yeah, let's see where this. Now, I haven't seen all of this. I saw this in installments, I should say. So, like the whole stream of it, the first couple 4 minutes or so, I don't think I saw, but I've seen the bulk of it. So some of this I will be reacting to for the first time. So if I miss anything, give a shout. As usual, same rules apply. Yell at me if you can't hear anything, especially if you can't hear my mic. If I've left myself muted again. And if you can't hear the video, naturally, that's always good. So I am watching from Japan. So it's like next year there. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, what time is it there? It's going to be what, 8 o'clock at night? No, 8 or 9 p.m., I think. 8 p.m. here on Saturday. Okay, yep. First, let me shrink myself down. All right, here we go.
Hey, Tom Rabbit! I hope you got this for your recording. Hey, YouTube out there. Tom Rabbit likes to record these. Hey, Tom Rabbit!
I suspect that I made a mistake in making this title so clear and transparent because the atheists are too cowardly. We got to pick something, that they're not cowardly about.
What would you change it to?
Oh, well, if I really wanted to cater to their cowardliness, I could just change the title. There's no evidence for God. Change my mind, and then they would all go, yeah. There's no evidence for God. Oh, there's no evidence for God. Oh, where's the evidence?
This is the best he can do after years of discussing things with atheists. That's the best he can do. Every atheist that he's ever talked to is just going to come on there with the evidence thing. Like, okay. I mean, a lot of them might at some point, depending on where the conversation starts and where it goes. But keep in mind, this is the guy that doesn't accept someone answering, giving the reason for their lack of belief or their reason for disbelief as they're not convinced the stories they're reading about the God of the Bible are true. It's not that tough, but Darth has a hard time, accepting an answer as an answer.
Sheila, come on up. What would you like to say, Sheila?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I have good morning. I have conversations with atheists all the time. I'm a Christian, and I don't get that response at all. I have a feeling, Darth, it might be the demonstration you just gave us with the that might be what's causing them to troll and act that way towards you, because I don't experience that.
Okay. I don't agree with you, but I will agree that your objection is substantive. But
Well,
I think that
thank
your
you.
objection
I
is wrong.
appreciate.
What the fuck is that? Like, she comes in later, like, yeah, if you're wondering why they're not talking to you, you consistently childishly mocking them might be a kind of a turnoff and a detractor. And he's like, well, I don't agree, but it's a substantive critique. Okay, you disagree with it. What about it is substantive, I wonder? Like, okay, fair point, but I disagree. I wonder if people are not. So it's not that Darth's obnoxious. That's not what's doing it. It's not that he's an insulting, abusive, rhetorically, verbally, a massive case of verbal dysentery, kind of, loathsome creature. No, that's not what discourages conversations between him and any. Like, does Darth actually think that it's only atheists that are not interested or not totally prepared to speak with him? Because we're going to get a pretty good example. Like, Sayla comes in here and is like, yeah, just by the way, the way you tend to talk about atheists might have something to do with the fact that you're not getting. Well, and I would disagree a little bit with Sayla here, right? I think it's because he's banned so many of us, right? Like, I don't even think he can see like people like me or anybody show up anymore, right? Unless he's looking around other channels and trying to go, because I don't know that anybody has him blocked, right? So he could go wandering around into rooms that he's not normally interested in and see all the people that he's got blocked. I think that's how it works on Clubhouse anyway. But no one, when he runs his worldviews and conflict thing, and he's the mod, he starts the thing, he doesn't have to worry about anybody showing up there that he doesn't want to deal with. So I think this is fascinating from a guy who has established a long-running reputation from Discord to Clubhouse of curating exactly who, like, he keeps a troll list. He has notes on individual usernames, people that he keeps an eye on. And he has people consistently blocked, and has now established a new thing where he's going to block Christians that either occasionally or routinely talk with Jack Angstreich, Tom Rabbit, Godless Girl, and I think maybe a handful of others, maybe Haiti. These are all people who are frequently on Clubhouse. So, yeah, I wonder if the constant banning and muting has something to do with the fact that you're not able to get, people to show up and talk to you. Because the people that would routinely maintain a conversation with you for longer than 10 or 15 minutes, right, are the ones you labeled cantankerous or argumentative or trending towards rabbit holes and things like that. And then you've blocked, and then you accuse them of trolling and stalking you. That's the ultimate goal. You're a stalker. You're stalking Darth Dawkins. It's not that you simply have a case of there's this asshole online who's wrong, so you've got a case of somebody's wrong on the internet, right? And, late at night, first thing in the morning, after that first shot of caffeine, you're like, okay, you're preoccupied with what crazy nonsense has come out of this old fool's mouth. No, it's not that. You are specifically obsessed with him personally, even though Darth doesn't give anything up about himself personally. Or at least not intentionally. He once did reveal himself personally, I believe, in a hangout, and that's how people found out his real name, and then some things happened, and then some unfortunate doxing occurred, and that whole mess. But that's another issue, too. But that gets to Darth's motives about other things. Pinworm, thank you very much for the super sticker. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, contrary to popular opinion, I don't mind people stringently disagreeing with me as long as people are making substantive comments and they're not trolling. So maybe you're not asking the right kind of questions. Because you see, atheists will turn to lying and obfuscation like throwing on a switch as a strategy, as George Bush would say.
I've witnessed Christians and Muslims alike do very similar things, and not just that. Like, I think as Christians, we are called to take. take a stand and like not compromise in certain areas of our beliefs, but at the same time walk in an air of humility at the same time. And sometimes I think we fail to do that, and so it makes us less effective. It depends on what our objective is. If our objective is to be right and make a point, well, then we do that. But if our objective is to share and possibly even change someone's mind, then not so much.
So now you're changing the topic.
I think she's just having a conversation. So, I mean, I love it. This guy is so fucked up when he talks to people. Like he's the opposite of what's the? I think it's a raconteur, right? A person who's a conversational, a skilled conversationalist, right? A good French word, like those other French words, like "c'est la vie," which Darth doesn't know how to pronounce or just refuses to pronounce correctly. I think maybe pronouncing French makes him a communist or something. I mean, in Darth's crazy mind, it probably does. She's not. I don't think she's making necessarily bad points here, right? And this is a common theme for her. She's like, well, I have these conversations with people of variety of different, people who are Muslim, they're theists, but it's a different faith tradition, or with atheists. And I'm not really running into this, and that's going to be a common. Well, it's commonly implied, I think, at the beginning here, but.
Okay. Now, do you have a Bible?
I do. I normally have a Bible in a close vicinity. I'm a theological nerd, so yeah.
Okay. What translation do you like?
Ooh, Darth. Are you asking me so that you can categorize me to figure out if you'll like me or dislike me?
No. I just want.
Points to Scylla. Yes, that's what he's doing. The weird thing about this is that I think people have asked him about this, and I think he said that he doesn't really commit to anything. Like he can appreciate the King James version. He likes the ESV. Has issues with the NIV, which I think a lot of fundies do. And apologies for being too dismissive with that, but I mean, I think it's fair. If you talk to a Christian, they're just like the NIV, and they have that like distasteful, like you burnt the muffins kind of look on their face. I mean, probably 9 times out of 10, that person's probably a dangerous lunatic, minimum, or a shortened fundy. The NIV is not that bad a translation. It does have some problematic issues, but they're relatively minuscule. And a lot of the issues that I think scholars have with the NIV are the ones that the fundies wouldn't have with it, like the use of like homosexual in certain translations. Like, yeah, that word might not, like for us, is probably a little bit weirder than the Greek word that's being used in that New Testament passage, but the NIV scholars decided to go with that. Maybe they shouldn't have, right? Because it's not a one-to-one correlation, right? But that's the one thing where they're like, nope, right there. It's right there in the NIV Bible. It says homosexuality. Like, can't argue with that. Like, wait a minute, but you don't like the NIV for other things, So it's fucked up. An outspoken woman. That's 2 strikes right there. Yeah, and she's kind of figured out, like, I think this is weird because he noticed that he asked her if she's got a Bible, and she's like, I've got one nearby. I'm a theology nerd. He didn't ask her what the 5th book of the New Testament was, which is a common question that he'll use to test people. He didn't ask her that. Now he wants to know which translation she likes. So yeah. I don't think he does ask her like which book comes where, and that might be because he's assuming. My guess is in Darth's mind, he's assuming she won't know, and he's being kind. I really do think that. Maybe I'm wrong, but he's a creep. Someone other than Darth's talking. Can you hear the stress through Darth's United mic? Or muted? I think it's supposed to be muted mic.
Want to know if you like King James or if you prefer the NIV or the ESV. I'm just curious. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like Young's literal translation the most.
Young's literal. Whew. Selah, you are talking my language. I don't know. I don't read that version. Literal translation. I don't know that that's not a common one. Yeah. Holy Bible containing the Old and New Covenants, literally and idiomatically translated out of the original languages. Interesting. I highlighted a Digital Hammurabi's comment here. I use the NIV. That's an example. That's a reason why some fundamentalists won't like the NIV. That's Dr. Josh's go-to. That's reason to put it down and pick yourself up the ESV version, the one approved by. I think the ESV is used in a lot of Reformed churches. I think a lot of Reformed, like conservative, more conservative Calvinists seem to go towards the ESV. I'm a New Revised Standard person because that's just the version of study Bibles that I have. But I like the NIV too. Randolph says, "Oh, I've listened to Selah on Clubhouse a few times recently. She's very smart. Darth Dawkins is probably going to get completely messed up here." Well, I mean, nobody defeats Darth Dawkins like Darth Dawkins. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good example of that. Good morning, Jeff Trumbull. Thanks for showing up. Yes, good morning. I'm doing a weird early morning Saturday stream again. So
actually,
Okay.
or Weymouth, yeah.
Okay. Well, then you are a theological nerd. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with Romans 1.
I am.
Okay. Romans 1, it says, ever since the beginning of the creation, God's eternal powers, his attributes have been clearly seen through everything that has been made so that they are without an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall that?
Preach, Darth.
I do.
I wonder if Selah claims she's a theological nerd, I wonder if she's heard of this guy named Paul. Like, Selah, have you heard of Paul? He wrote some letters. And they're kind of prominent in the New Testament. Like, this is already super condescending, right? Like, she's reading Young's literal translation, right? So she's and he's like, oh, you are a theological nerd. I don't know. I don't know what kind of commentary comes with Young's. Maybe you would have to be. I don't know who would kind of gravitate towards that. So I don't know what kind of if it's got like theological commentary and kind of things built into it. The fact that it's talking about it has the idiomatic and literal translations of the Old and New Covenant, I find problematic, right? That's definitely kind of like, that already sounds like Christian language front loaded into the whole conversation. Right? Like, you're not getting like a literal translation of the Hebrew Bible, which is organized totally differently than the Old Testament. But I mean, if Young's translation is kind of this like literal idiomatic translation of sort of the Septuagint and the Old Testament, New Testament part of the Bible, the way it's organized and built around Old Covenant story, New Covenant story, fulfillment of the prophecies, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, it kind of makes sense, but it's still kind of problematic. Especially if you get into conversations with some of those Christians about the Old Testament, because then you can't really stop them from taking everything that they know about the Gospels and the letters of Paul and just constantly projecting that back into the past onto the books of the Old Testament.
Okay. The word excuse there is the same word that we get for apologetics. It means they are without a defense. Excuse me. I just had some taste of pepper.
Are you okay?
Taste of pepper.
No, I'm okay. I just had some. I was just tasting some pepper from my.
I should have named this stream that. Maybe I will change it. Darth Dawkins, a taste of pepper.
Finished egg sandwich and it reverberated on me. I love pepper. So the word is. Apologia. It means they are completely without a defense whatsoever. And it says they turn and they worship the creation. Now, do you agree with that verse?
If you mean that they are without excuse in their perspective, because it can be seen Like when you look out your window, you can see the beauty and the connection between everything. And that it can be rather obvious that there is a intelligent designer, then, and that's what
No,
you're saying, then
it's
yes.
not. No, it's not. It's not obvious.
This is so fucking weird, right? It's plain to all, right? It's been been made known to them so that they are without excuse. She uses the word obvious. He's going to say, no, that's not it.
Romans 1 doesn't say it's obvious. It says it is clearly seen.
Right,
They
exactly.
are without excuse.
So sure.
You know what obvious means, right, Darth? I think if you look it up, clearly seen is one of the things that's used, right? Easy to see, readily apparent, clearly seen. I don't know how she got the word obvious wrong, especially when Captain Thesaurus here is giving her a definition of the word obvious in telling her, no, that's not the word. That's not what's going on. Fucking unbelievable.
Instead of obvious,
There's a difference. There's a difference between something being obvious and something being clearly seen.
Really? What, theologically? I can't wait to hear this.
Sure. So we'll
if you say something is obvious, you're watering down.
But what does it? No, sure.
Seen.
So
why do you keep on over talking?
Why would that be watering it down? I mean, technically, if we're translating it from Koine Greek into English, aren't we watering it down? Why not just use the original Greek word for that? And then piss and moan when people try to translate it to obvious or clearly seen or self-evident or obvious or any of these other words that might be used in translation there. I mean, this is just childish. Like at this point, he's actively looking for a reason to disagree with Selah. I mean, and he's not even 6 minutes into the conversation with her, but not even that, because she came in a little bit later. So what's the point of this? Like, here's how Darth's going to show that he's in charge here. I'm going to quibble with you over the definition of obvious, which I'm going to get wrong by getting it right. Right? You're wrong because I can define obvious. Like, no, there's a difference between clearly seen and obvious. Not really. And if you're trying to talk about like the poetry of the language or something like that, somebody could get just even more nitpicky and be like, well, you know what? If you use the original Greek word has so much more a certain je ne sais quoi, that you can't get in the English, right? Sorry, I shouldn't use je ne sais quoi because God knows how Darth would pronounce that.
I'm sorry, Darth.
Now, so when atheists say there is no evidence for God, I'm sure you've heard them say that.
Yeah, I've heard people say there's no evidence for God.
Okay, now, when the Bible says that everything collectively clearly is indicative and revelatory of God's eternal powers, it says it clearly is seen and they are without excuse. When they say there's no evidence for God, to believe in God, are they giving an excuse?
Excuse in what sense?
Okay, so the first question is that, yeah, so I think that they would be giving an excuse. I absolutely
okay. Is that legitimate?
Is
that excuse truthful?
That's different. This is different now, right? So here's sort of the problem, right? Now I don't know why he's putting her on the hot seat for this, right? Now I do understand what motivated this. She started out the conversation kind of correcting him a little bit, and he said the correction was substantive. He said that criticism was a substantive one. She mentioned that he was making fun, the way he's making fun of and teasing atheists about the whole, no, you don't have evidence, that kind of shit, right? Because he was keeping it cool and keeping it classy. So that's how this has started. So now he wants to, and then she's kind of said, yeah, I've had these kinds of conversations and I don't get this kind of animosity, right? So they're clearly coming at this from different perspectives, right? Darth is convinced that everybody he talks to is an asshole, and she's kind of like, well, I kind of want to know what they think. She hasn't said like, oh, I'll wait and see if they're an asshole later. But, I'm sure most people will do that, right? Most people will start talking to somebody and give them the opportunity to either turn out to be a good conversationalist or a shitty conversationalist or a complete raging asshole and dickhead, or, maybe they're just lunatics or something like that, or just completely wrong. Maybe they're great conversationalists, but you don't agree with like 80% of what they do. These kinds of people exist, right? So Darth now is like, okay, well, here's the thing. Do they tell you that? Have you heard them say they don't have any evidence for God, right? But he's also kind of included in this conversation, like when you're talking to these people, have they told, like, do you think that they're being honest with you when they say that they don't have evidence for God, they don't believe? Asaila's initial kind of responses to this is, well, yeah. Right? Now he's going to change it to, well, do you think that their excuse for not believing is legit? What difference does that make? If you're a Christian, you're like, no, I don't think that they have good reason to. I mean, they have their reasons for rejecting the God of the Bible. I don't agree with those reasons. I don't know, maybe I don't know that they're legitimate. Maybe I think they're illegitimate. But the first part of the question was, do you think these people are being honest when they say they don't believe, or they believe that there are no gods, whichever way you want to put that? Is that statement a true one? Are they being truthful in the expression of their belief? Yeah. But Darth seems to be he's incapable of separating the fact that these people could be honest in saying they don't believe in God, right? And well, no, God's a truth, and you have to know it. Therefore, you're lying to me, right? This is somebody who's taken that Romans 1 kind of mentality that a lot of fundamentalists have and run it completely rampant. And you know that he has because he does not bring up Galatians. And it's very important. Galatians, let's take a look here. Chapter 4, verse 8 is a pretty good one, but if you actually want to read the entire chapter, I think it's talking about sons and heirs. Paul's concern for the Galatians. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those who by nature are not gods. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to those weak and worthless principles? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that my efforts for you may have been in vain. I beg you, brothers, become like me, for I became like you. You have done me no wrong. Right? When you did not know God. I don't see these guys, these evangelicals, talking about this. You'll hear Romans 1 like they've turned that into a cliche. Well, Paul says everybody knows God, so get wrecked, atheist. You're just lying to me, right? I can take that passage from Paul and prove by extension that anybody that I talk to that claims they don't believe in the Christian God is a liar, and claim that anyone who believes in any God other than the Christian God is also, by extension, a liar, because Paul says everybody knows God, right? But Paul also said in Galatians, formerly, when you did not know God, you were slave to those who by nature are not gods. And then, but now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it you're turning? Now, that's an interesting turn of phrase. You know God, or rather, you are now known by God. Okay. So it sounds like maybe Paul hadn't totally worked that out in his head. He might have been spitballing a little bit there. But this is de-emphasized in evangelical fundamentalist circles, because I don't hear them harping on the fact that people didn't know God before, but now know God, or rather are now known by God, and should make sure not to turn back to these other practices. No, what you hear constantly is the weaponization of Romans 1 into an apologetic, where they can use this to justify the fact that they're going to accuse any interlocutor that they talk to as being a liar from the outset, as if that somehow makes sense. Even though I don't think what Paul's trying to say is that everybody knows that there's a Christian God. It's more or less everybody thinks there's a God. No one has an excuse for that, right? And then he says something about turning to worship the creation, right? Okay, so clearly you have people who are willing to acknowledge the creator-creature distinction, but they're worshiping the wrong thing because they didn't. That's consistent with Galatians. They didn't know God, or they didn't know the correct one, or that God, the real correct God, didn't know them. Whatever Paul means by that, right? I mean, however you want to take that. There's different theological takes on that slightly. So, yeah, this is just like it's. I think it's always funny to see Christians start to bicker about this kind of stuff, and this is where they're going to get to. But Selah, obviously, I don't think is quite as hung up on Romans 1, right? She hasn't gotten to that point. Like, she didn't go to the same foaming at the mouth, rattlesnake handling boot camp that Darth went to. I'm sure his mom paid for that. 4 weekends in the mountains, folks. Plenty of antivenom just in case you do get stabbed, because science will protect you from the poisonous snakes. That BS part of Mark, that won't.
Does that excuse truthful? Oh no, I think that they might be conveying what it is that they really think, even though
That's not an answer to my question.
I think so, Darth. I think that
I think that it's an evasion. Are they being truthful
Darth,
when they declare that there is no evidence for God, when God says they are without any defense whatsoever?
God didn't say that. Paul wrote that. Now I know this is a huge problem for Darth, right? Because Darth's just going to, no, God said it. It's in the Bible. It's canon. But yeah, sure, Paul wrote it in a letter. But that's as good as God saying it. Okay. Unless you're a Jew. Right? Then obviously Paul's out of his mind and completely screwing up Judaism. But now he's like, okay, well, that's not true. Are they really without excuse? Like, well, in the sense that he's taking what Paul's saying in Romans 1, I guess not. But again, keep in mind, Selah is probably the type of person who's inclined to believe that if a person's like, yeah, I don't believe in God, she's willing to accept the fact they're not there. They're not convinced. But Darth is like, no. You have to believe in God. First of all, theologically, you already do. You're just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, which doesn't make any sense if you're trying to talk to somebody about whether, especially if it's not clear, like, Darth seems to be a doxastic voluntarist. You choose your beliefs, and you choose them based on evidence, which doesn't totally jive with even some of his positions. But I think that's where he gets this. And with that, he's doing that. No. You have to understand that if you've read this in the Bible, it says right there, this is a book written by God. So I guess we just have to take that for granted. And then in that book, it says you're without excuse, and that was written by God. No, it was not. God did not say that. Paul wrote that. So strike one. If you're trying to convince people, you might not want to jump the gun and tell them, like, well, here's the thing. What Paul wrote was inspired by God. It's the same as God saying it. It's special, and that's why it's in the Bible. It's part of special revelation. Somehow or another, we, as a body of believers, at some point, the church determined the differences between writings that weren't the words of God and those that are the words of God. And this one made it in. It made the cut. And so therefore, I can tell you right now, here's a book written, quote unquote, written by God, and God tells you that you believe in him and you have no excuse. Like, that's not actually what's going on there. It's a letter from Paul to the church in Rome, and he's trying to explain a scenario to them, right? About some of the circumstances they're dealing with as a church in Rome. And all of that gets missed. Right. Historically, if you take that scholarship into account, it's Paul writing a letter to one of the congregations, one of the Christian congregations, maybe the biggest one at the time, in Rome. He's writing it to them, and in all of the letters, Corinthians, Thessalonians, even the ones that aren't really attributed to him, when he's writing a letter to them, he's dealing with issues that particular congregation or group are dealing with in that day and age. They have something to do with something that is unique to them. The Thessalonians are getting weird about the fact that everybody's supposed to be bodily resurrected and made perfect, but yet they've had brothers and sisters pass away, and they're now in the ground or in an ossuary or whatever. They're not there's more things that is Jesus capable of putting Seth back together over there, because He's in rough shape now, but we were told that he was going to come back before any of us departed, and yet some of us have, departed. So these were real concerns that he was trying to address. Darth is just jumping past that thing and getting into like Sunday school. No, this is a message transmitted from this moment in time, and it has this other layer of meaning that gets beamed onto Christians, and it means this. Cool. That's not convincing to somebody who's an atheist or a skeptic, right? That's a theological take on the message that's being delivered there, right? There's the direct theological implications that Paul is communicating to the Roman church. And then there's this sort of weird indirect one where I can open the Bible, read the words, and then do what it says. That's the part most people get skeptical about. And that's the part that most Christians should probably be the most careful about, because that's not how you should read the Bible.
When they do not accept that everything in the world clearly reveals God. So when they say there's no evidence for God, is that true?
I don't think that it's true, Darth, that there is no evidence for God. However,
okay, so
Darth,
what they say is not
Darth,
true.
I don't
then,
think that's
right?
fair. If you don't want to have like a back and forth dialogue, like allow me to say something, and then
I'm
say
getting
something.
the feeling that you're evading my
No,
simple fair
well,
questions.
please don't get that feeling.
Are they being
Darth,
truthful
I just want
when
the
they say there's no?
opportunity to finish a sentence. That's all.
You may in a second.
Why is it important that she answer that question? What fucking difference could that possibly make? Are they being truthful when they say that? What is she supposed to say? All of them are being 100% truthful 100% of the time. And what he's already done is he's already confused what he means by truthful. Truthful as in they legitimately believe that there are no gods. Their legitimate belief. They're convinced that there's no Christian God, at the very least, right? We'll keep it with local atheism since Darth gets weirded out about that, right? So maybe they have two beliefs. They are convinced, they're convicted that there is no Christian God, and they tend to be convinced that there's no other gods. They don't believe in other supernatural beings, higher powers, ethereal realms, any of this other kind of stuff. They don't believe in that either. Are they being truthful? Truthful how? When they tell you they don't believe that? Or when they give you their reasons for it, right? Like, it can just be that somebody's not convinced, right? Especially for Christians. Christians are like, well, we have evidence of God. What's your evidence of God? This book that we read? Don't confuse this, folks. What they're saying is, I read a book and I believe the stories are true, or at least mostly true. If you're a fundamentalist, you better believe it's 100% true. And in some cases, literally true. But that's all it is. I read a book and I believe the stories are real. Okay, that's your reason for believing. There's a book and you read it and you think the claims are true. What's my reason for not believing? I read the book and those stories, and I think they're made up. I'm not convinced they're real. They have fantastical elements that can't be reproduced. They have supernatural elements that no one could possibly reproduce or prove. They make claims about history that are demonstrably wrong, claims about the natural world that defy physics. So, yeah, I'm not convinced that it's accurate. Realistically, I think that they might be works of literature, they're cultural artifacts, they're aspects of a faith tradition that was attempted to preserve over hundreds of years. There's lots of different things depending on how you get into the study of it. That's why I'm not convinced it's literally true. Is that good enough? Nope. Because Romans 1 says you believe in God. What does that have to do with whether or not I'm being honest when I say I don't believe? Like, Darth can't even keep this straight. And he's talking to another Christian about this. This is truly sad, right? And he'd be able to have this conversation if he wasn't so much more concerned. Like, it is apparent that his insecurity runs so deep. He is desperate to prove that he is more correct than Selah. She could be correct about certain things, right? He's feigned being impressed by she reads the Young's literal translation of the Bible, right? I don't think he's being genuine at all about that, because he really hasn't put her to the test. He hasn't asked her about that fifth book of the Bible, that's of the New Testament. That's a big one. So this is just about Darth trying to show how alpha male he is in the faith. by fucking up definitions and screwing around with weird questions. Like Selah needs to be able to she needs to be able to perceive the motivations, intentions, and the certainty with which other people profess their beliefs. The only thing that she can be certain of is that she's hearing from people out there who either identify as atheists or have been labeled as atheists, that they don't believe in God. What's she supposed to do with that? Probably what most people will do. It's the same thing atheists do if somebody presents themselves as being Christian. You accept that that's their stance, and you go with it. You don't automatically accept, you don't automatically anticipate, you're misrepresenting. Like if atheists did this kind of thing, somebody came up and said, "Yo, well, what's your worldview? What's your stance?" "Oh, I'm a Bible-believing Christian." No, you're not. Can't be. It's not true. It's not true, therefore you cannot believe it. They would lose their minds. And in Darth's case, he doesn't have much left to lose, if anything. AJ, thanks for the super chat. That guy, I bribe him with a super chat. Thank you for the bribe. I appreciate it.
And all I want to know is when I ask a question, I don't want you to go down semi-related rabbit trails. I'm asking you direct questions, and you are giving me semi-related answers. Are they being truthful when they say there's no evidence for God?
Darth, I feel like because you don't give me the opportunity to speak, you're making assumptions that I'm giving semi-related answers. And I would appreciate if you'd allow me to finish my thought and then make that assessment if I'm giving a semi-related answer.
Shall I ask the question again?
Yes, you may, fancy pants. Mathpick, I never believe anything Jefferson says. Clearly, Darth is right about everything. Yeah, it follows, right? Yeah. No, Mathpick knows me too well. Everything I say is a lie. Sorry. It's too early for those kinds of logic puzzles. The semi-related answers are still related answers. Yeah, and this odd thing where Darth is doing the same thing to her that he does to atheists. But with atheists, it gets lost in the muddle. Like, oh no, you're bringing up a rabbit trail, or you're going in a different direction. Like, if we're having a conversation, then other elements can get pulled into this. If there's implications to the language that you're using that might be drawing in other facets we might need to discuss. That's a natural kind of ebb and flow, and it's expected that there should be a little bit of give and take when you're having a discussion. But Darth, debate bro Dawkins, will not have that. No, here's the topic, stick with the topic, right? And it's usually a poorly defined topic with a horribly mangled question, with questionable rhetoric and odd syntax. Do they have like how many times has he rephrased this question? Do they have an excuse? Are they being truthful? But like I don't even know what, if I were Selah, I'm not even sure what you're asking me anymore, right? And for any Christians, especially if Selah's listening, I would be interested to have a conversation with her about this, because I think it would be interesting to see what her take is on this now that she's had some time to reflect on this. But for any other Christians that are not in Darth camp and are wondering, like, when you talk about this, just ask him, wait, are you asking me if I believe Christians when they say they don't believe in God? Are you asking me if I am inclined to think that they have good reasons for why they're not a believer? Because it seems like that's what Darth's trying to suss out here. But he's being cagey as fuck about it. Like, just act like this is not a good way to even engage in this conversation. And they haven't even been talking that long. And you can tell by the way Selah is addressing his questions and the tone of her voice, she already feels like that she's dealing with somebody who wants to trap her. That's bad. Because she's a Christian and she's talking to another Christian. So exactly, this is a perfect example of when, like, these guys start to talk about, well, and this is a point that I've been meaning to make, right? If Christianity is just promising that you get an eternal life in paradise after all this horrible shit is over with, right? Your life, the pain, the misery, the uncertainty, the ennui, all that kind of stuff. Too much French going on this stream. But anyway, when that happens, you get to go into an eternal paradise, and your soul continues its infinite existence in the embrace and the loving arms of God. Cool, right? Nice. But that's not the only claim that Christianity makes. Christianity, most Christianity, especially in the United States, makes very real, definite claims about things that are supposed to happen to you right here and now. And one of them is you're going to be turned into a better person. Now, the extent that you're made better and in what way you will be made better, and those things vary a little bit, right? But there's all sorts of stuff in the New Testament about the fruits of the Holy Spirit and how these people are supposed to be developing. The peace, the kindness, the long-suffering patience. These things are supposed to become evident, not only amongst the body of believers, but to anyone outside looking in. And they see this comportment, and it becomes an attractant. It's an example to those to bring them into the fellowship. And this is not evident with Darth or any of the Christians that follow along with him, right? These guys are the opposite of that, right? People are attracted to their conversations for hostility's sake. They show up because of a dopamine hit. They want to see Darth get owned by another interlocutor. They want to see the debate happen. They want to see that exchange of ideas and maybe see it get a little hostile and stuff. Some people are probably motivated to see maybe Darth be convinced that some of the positions that he holds aren't as strong as he thinks they are, just to see that one adjustment, right? But you don't see that. You don't see that give and take. You don't see that patience. You don't see kindness. You don't see love. You barely see sympathy with these guys, other than just kind of a shallow, superficial expression of sympathy if somebody says something about maybe a real-world tragedy or something like that, loss of a loved one or something. You might hear that. That's not going to prevent Darth from going after somebody if they say, no, I think all these Christians these atheists have a point. I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. But some of these, like, what if they took a firmer stance and say, like, yeah, not only do I believe they're honest when they're saying that they don't believe, but I also think they've got some good reasons for doubting. I think they make some good points. Because I've struggled with doubt as a Christian. Darth will cut that Christian off. And now he's blocking them on this. Like, I don't think that he spends any time in an actual congregation. This is his congregation. This is how he deals with other Christians, is by blocking them and yelling at them and haranguing them with this bullshit. He's evidence that there is no Holy Spirit. If Christianity was just making the claim, the promise that you get to go to heaven if you believe in God, this wouldn't matter. But Christianity makes a lot of other promises too. And Darth is evidence that those promises are not real. That you don't become a better person, that your life doesn't improve. Most of Darth's bitterness is based on the fact that he thinks he is a self-righteous prick who has lost in real life. He's lost his family. He doesn't have a good job. He lives with his mom. He doesn't have so he's watched other people that he thinks are dumb and unworthy and liars and scumbags succeed, where his life has constantly been kicking him in the balls. And I know how the guys like this work. The only consolation that they have is that he's thinking that because he is forced to live this hard life where he's constantly being persecuted in this real world, when he goes to heaven, he's looking at the biggest fucking mansion imaginable. No one's going to have a shinier house on Heaven Street than Darth Dawkins, in Darth Dawkins' own mind. And that's what keeps him going. Even though that's all afterlife crap. The evidence for how this was supposed to work is that this religion is supposed to provide you real comfort, real solace, and some kind of tangible benefits in the here and now. You're not guaranteed wealth. You're not guaranteed success. But one of the things you are guaranteed is an improvement in yourself. And those fruits of the Holy Spirit are supposed to be made manifest. And it just so happens that those fruits of the Holy Spirit, and this is the weird thing about the New Testament, those fruits of the Holy Spirit actually do, in a lot of ways, correspond to happy, successful people in this life, in this world. And Darth's not in that. He's not part of that. You couldn't categorize him as any one of those people. So I give to you the best evidence for the absence of the Holy Spirit at a minimum, or the total absence or the incorrect nature of any of these claims of Christianity, is the existence of Darth Dawkins himself, a man who sounds completely convinced that this is real, but demonstrates no change. Nothing about him represents what we're told by a book he believes to be written by God. There are properties described there that he does not represent. He represents a huge contradiction of his own faith.
Sure.
Are they being truthful when they declare openly there's no evidence for God?
I don't think that they're being truthful when they make that declaration, but I also believe that doesn't affect or
are they lying to themselves when they say that?
I think that they are in a place where yeah, maybe so. But Darth, here's the thing about all of it. It's
so you agree with the
Darth,
title that
please,
says atheist troll
Darth,
and obfuscate?
come on. Are you for real? Like, are you for real right now?
Yeah, I don't need, I am real. I don't need you giving me a little mini community college lecture where you sugarcoat the atheist.
Sugarcoat, Darth. I think that somebody that's an atheist, I think that around the when they look around the world, it is obvious that a God exists. Now, whether they have the inability to accept that truth, it doesn't mean that I need to treat them like a peon.
They have an inability to accept it. They have an inability. See, now again, you're changing the subject. You're actually doing what they do.
Oh no, Darth can only handle one thing at a time, right? He's not a multitasker. That's what makes him a man's man. AJ, note to Jefferson, evidently the theist trolls aren't up at this hour. Good to know for the future. Yeah, so far so good. Mythic, any answer more than one sentence is a community college lecture, and we're the ones who can't focus. Yeah, exactly. Like that natural give and take that is supposed to happen in a discussion, mind you, right? Like these kinds of accusations would make sense if they were in a debate and somebody's trying to like take it in a direction that doesn't match. No, you're going off topic, right? She came into a room. This the name of the room: atheists troll and obfuscate. Change my mind. I don't know about you, but if somebody has worded that way, it doesn't sound like change my mind is really going to be available. Like if somebody just rolls atheist trolling, okay, so atheist trolling, meaning that the atheists are the one that are going into rooms and saying things that are blatantly offensive just to get a reaction, including blatant things they don't believe, right? I think Darth does think that. I think he thinks that's part of atheism. Because what God said in Romans 1, big quotes around that, right? Because that's horseshit, right? Because Paul wrote that in Romans 1, we can assume that what God meant was, there's a God and it's Jesus. So all you're doing is coming in here and pissing me off with your bullshit, right? This doesn't make sense, right? That's a huge portion of Darth's worldview, that does not make sense. Right? There are passages talking about people being given over to deceiving spirits, their minds being given over to deceiving spirits and being turned over to a reprobate mind. So what does that mean? Right? There are Calvinists that think that these people should be pitied, right? Because they're clearly not the elect and they're destined for hell. The notion that you would get upset about these people, right, and stand there and berate them for it is a testament to the fact that Darth believes that what gets you saved is thinking right, having the right thoughts, reaching the right conclusions. Not surprisingly, identical conclusions to Darth's. And if you don't, you're falling short. Now that's interesting when you believe that salvation is by grace and faith alone, not your faith, God's faith. Jesus' faith, right? Jesus was the faithful one. Jesus was the trustworthy one. Jesus was the one that fulfilled the covenant. That's why it's salvation by faith. You didn't do it. You couldn't do it. That's the whole fucking message. That's supposed to be anyway. You're supposed to be able to calm down. But Christians keep getting the plot fucking twisted. It's not enough that Jesus shows up and rescues people. It's also gotta be Christians need to take some steps and do some stuff, because it can't just be we all get in, because some of these assholes better not show up in heaven with me. So let's come up with some rules and some guidelines that explain why some of these people are destined for an eternity of torture and punishment. Why? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't follow any kind, makes no narrative sense at all unless you're a lunatic. Or you need the dopamine hit that comes with this idea that, well, here's the thing, the quote unquote good people are going to get rewarded because they believed the right things and they did the right things and they made up. Like, no, careful. Works don't get you saved. Faith gets you saved. Whose faith? Your faith or God's faith? If all I needed was faith in God, I didn't need Jesus to die for me. I needed Jesus's faith to save me. That's the Christian message. But I'm supposed to accept it. I'm supposed to acknowledge it. And then I'm supposed to do what God says and read the Bible and do what it says and go through all these different motions. And if I don't, then I will fall short and then I will lose my salvation and be sent to hell. Doesn't make sense. It does not track. Sorry, it doesn't. And I apologize to anybody who's watching this hoping that they're going to get something affirming about that, but it doesn't make sense. The narrative that does make sense is that you're all saved. I'm sorry, but I think universalists are onto something, even though there are narratives in different books of the New Testament and different narratives that they project back onto aspects of the Old Testament. Universalism works because it's consistent with what God is trying to do. If you take the narrative to be complete, the Christian narrative, there's an Old Testament, there's a New Testament. Old Covenant, God's making deals with different people, select people to serve as an example throughout history and society. New Covenant, it's not about people doing the right thing. It's not about people trying to fulfill the law. The law was there to show people how far they'd fallen, how hard it is to really reconcile oneself with God by being right? You can try to fulfill the law. You can do that, but it doesn't change your heart. But Jesus does, and you don't have to worry about your heart being changed because you're already you are at enmity with God. So Jesus takes care of all that for you. That makes sense. Darth should be able to kick back, put his feet up, breathe a big sigh of relief, and roll with the punches anytime somebody shows up like, I don't believe in God. You know what, kid? You don't have to. Wouldn't that be a lot more relaxing? It'd be a hell of a lot better for Darth's blood pressure if that's how he approached it. But that's not how he approaches it. Darth believes you are saved because you do it. You make the right choices. You think the right thoughts. You say the right things. You do the right things. Darth, for whatever he wants to represent himself as, or how anyone else, any of his friends want to represent him, Darth and Christians like him believe entirely that your salvation is based on works. Your works. You deserve it. You're right, so you get the cookie.
You are obfuscating the issue that's at hand. What we're talking about is what they do and what they think. Now, are you sticking to that topic?
I'm sticking to I'm sticking to that. Not only am I sticking to that topic, but I'm also adding in a third element on how they should be treated for how they think.
No, what you're doing is, no, you're not sticking to that topic.
I am.
You're interjecting a new topic in order to obfuscate what the topic is at hand.
No, Darth, I think you're a little bit controlling. And instead of wanting to talk to people and know where they're coming from, you want to control the conversation.
But I am assertively setting the parameters of the room by the title of the room. You are attempting, while pretending to address the question, to segue onto a semi-related topic, which is not the topic, which is, are they being mentally and verbally truthful when they deal with believers?
What is that? Mentally and verbally truthful? What the fuck is he talking about? Again, this gets back to this issue. Like, what do you want to know, Darth? Can you trust atheists when they say they believe there is no God? Or are you saying, hey, you don't have any good reasons for it, so you better stop saying that? Because that doesn't make any sense. People can believe things for bad reasons. They're called Christians. Sorry. Shameless punch.
That's the topic. Did you get?
So I do think that they are being truthful in saying that they believe that there's not evidence. However,
is there
Darth, you
belief?
can't do that. Let somebody finish their talks.
Wow,
Let them
you
finish
must be
their
a joy.
sentence for
You must
crying
be
out
a
loud.
joy on a
Okay,
blind
Darth,
date.
maybe some other time because.
Okay, so as if his attitude wasn't shitty enough, now she's not worth dating. You must be a joy on a blind date. Okay, so why not just call her shrill, Darth? Actually, I think he calls her a snot later on in this, so that's kind of close. What does that have to do with it, right? Here's a good example of this, right? Darth does not say this kind of stuff to men, right? He wouldn't say like, "Oh, I bet you're." Well, maybe he has. Maybe he said, "I bet you're a real hit with the ladies," or something like that. I doubt it, though. My guess is that's not something he deploys. But in her case, "Oh, you must be a joy on a blind date." Well, how many blind dates would you go on, Darth, where this is, well, never mind. Darth would start every blind date with like, so do you believe in Jesus? What's your favorite version? What's your favorite translation of the Bible? If you say it's Young's literal translation, that triggers me. Just somebody I've met online. That's terrible. Yeah, exactly, Reckinator. There it is. Misogynism RS. Why bring up the fact that she would be a bad date? He would never say anything remotely related to this to a guy. But now all of a sudden he's got to make it known, like there's no chance that you two are going to be romantically involved, Darth. There's no chance. So saying this to her as if this is going to well, you know what? You're less desirable as a female now, so good luck getting a husband. Like, dude, what century did you grow up in? Oh, wait, right. The 20th. But apparently, nothing about that, it's always weird because the guys like this will get labeled as boomers, but my parents are boomers, right? And boomers are not, not every boomer, and this doesn't need to be said. Just because boomers grew up in some really weird decades, right, and have internalized a lot of crazy shit, does not mean that they do this kind of shit. Now, unfortunately, it's true that a lot of this stuff, even for like Gen Xers, there's shit that I do that I catch myself thinking in the deep recesses of my brain where I kind of like, where the fuck did that come from, right? Not overtly misogynistic, but just like, why did my brain go there first, right? And I know it has something to do with like probably my very conservative, socially conservative Christian upbringing. That shit's still there. And every once in a while that stuff will pop up and I just have to like kind of like flag that away. Like that's a crazy, stupid, unrelated thing, knock that shit off, right? Darth, though, at the tender age of 60, 70, just blurts the stuff out. It just comes out like this is a legitimate way to talk to somebody. Oh, wow. You must be a real treat on a blind date. You'd be lucky. When was the last time you went on a blind date, you weirdo? And you don't look like Taylor Hicks, right? I imagine that maybe you have the hair of Taylor Hicks, but it's like stacked on top of a very old, left in the fridge for too long shiitake mushroom kind of thing. That's what I'm thinking.
You don't want to have honest dialogue. You just want to be able to prove points.
I do, but
then allow
you reserve
the. Okay, Stephanie. If Darth corrects himself, then you have no show. You need his error. It would be awesome if he did. I'm not going to lie to you. I would have no trouble shutting my channel down, or at the very least, never covering Darth again. If Darth had some Ebenezer Scrooge moment and flipped around, and all of a sudden, like he doesn't even have to change his beliefs. I don't care if he deconverts or deconstructs his fake tradition. He just stops doing this kind of stuff, right? Even if I would acknowledge like his transformation, if he just stopped doing this to fellow Christians. That's what makes this video so interesting to watch. He's treating Selah no differently than he treats a lot of atheists, except maybe giving her a little bit more time to talk. I mean, she's complaining that she's not had a lot of time to respond and that he's stomping on the ends of almost every response she gives, which is true for almost everybody. But she has been given more time to respond, at least initially, than a lot of atheists are. And that's just categorically. Now he's getting impatient because now he's getting misogynistic. And he's going to keep doing that, right? So Stephanie, yeah, I don't need this for the show. Well, I need it for this particular show for him to be a D-bag, but I would welcome him changing his ways. That would be a good thing overall.
Liberty.
Sentence, for crying out loud.
You see, then if you're going to lay down that rule,
I rather
you're going to lay down that rule. Are you going to follow that rule?
Enough to allow
are you going to follow that
to
rule? Hey, honey, are you going to follow that rule?
Darth, I'd rather talk to atheists who allow other perspectives to speak than this here.
Have you interrupted me at all this time? You see, you want to play by a double standard.
Yeah.
What's the double standard? She's just said that she wants to talk to people that let her finish. If you're that kind of person, if you can be that kind of interlocutor, for lack of a better word, just a conversation partner, if you can do that in a conversation, then she's going to continue to have a conversation with you. But you're too fucking controlling and too fucking obnoxious and too fucking dim-witted to be able to do that. Like, he can't have an interesting conversation because he's not an interesting person, right? I think he knows some things about some slightly interesting theological topics, but he himself is not that interesting a person, right? What makes him interesting is the sort of like almost, what's that Simpsons episode where they find out that Burns has so many diseases that it's the Three Stooges effect. They're all trying to go through the door at one time. So all of the diseases that he has are in perfect balance. So they're just kind of like being propped up. So he's in kind of a stasis mode. He's simultaneously dying of everything, but maybe immortal. And I feel like that's kind of like Darth's mental process. Like, he might have all of the personality disorders and insanity, and somehow they're just sort of like rubbing up against each other in a way that seems like it's intentional. Like, there's, sorry, that's too negative. But you know what I mean? This guy is so obnoxious in the way that he addresses this, right? Like, if he wants to have decent conversations, no, that's a stupid thing to say. He can't have decent conversations because his personality won't allow it. I really do think this guy would have to go through a shitload of therapy and be open to change before he could get to a point where he could modify his behavior, where he'd stop doing shit like this. Like, this is part of his kick, his dopamine kick. And his kink, right? This is how he has to interact with people. And this is what's left him isolated.
Cut me off any number of times.
People who want to have a real conversation.
I do want to have a conversation with you. Did you cut me off at any time since you've been on stage?
I did, no differently than you've done.
Yeah. Okay. So then why the emotional double standard?
Because I apologized when I did mine.
Oh, okay. So from now on, we're not going to cut each other off, right?
That sounds like a deal. Thanks, Darth.
Good. Now, number two, we're not going to segue onto semi-related topics, right?
It depends on if the segue is applicable.
No, it doesn't depend, because I'm not going to permit it. We have a topic here. Are atheists trolling and obfuscating?
But he's not controlling. No, we're not going to get into other topics because I won't allow it. Aren't you being controlling? I'm not controlling. You're controlling.
I.e. that they are lying about what they say. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they say there's no evidence for God, you said that's not true, right?
Wait, when I say that they say that there's no evidence for God?
When atheists say there's no evidence for God,
from my perspective,
do they have a justification for saying that?
Hey, just stop being argumentative, Darth, and just have a conversation.
It's not argumentative. That's a direct question.
No, I'm not being argumentative. It's a direct question. You just did it again, Darth. Way to consistently demonstrate everything she's correcting you on. Like, hey, could you not be so controlling? I'm not controlling. I refuse to accept this conversation going in any way that I don't want it to go. So there. That's not being controlling. Just like obvious doesn't mean clearly seen. Right. I mean, I think we are witnessing the almost pure insanity of Darth Dawkins' mind at this point, right? Like his inability, like the lack of self-awareness here to not realize what he just said there. He's done this multiple times in this conversation, right? And I don't know if it's because he's talking to, I think it might be, because it seems like the last time this was this obvious, this frequently in one conversation was when he was talking with Shannon Q. right? And that one really triggered him because she just started laughing at him because his, I think she put it, his dialectic was so weird, right? Which is just a way of saying, like, the way you communicate with people is fucked. And then now he's still obsessed with the fact that she's clearly a, well, I don't know what all he calls her other than duck lips, but I'm sure in private chats and stuff, he doesn't say anything good about Shannon, right? Because she's a woman who laughed at him, and his tiny ego can't handle that, right? And he's building this up. I really do think he's projecting a lot on here, right? There's something weird here. Selah is not like, Selah stepped into this conversation with a little bit of criticism. Like, hey, maybe don't talk about people like that, and maybe they'll be more interested in talking to you. Not a controversial point of not a huge blow to one's ego either. But he used that as an opening to get into this conversation, to show, to do everything he can at every step, every response, to show that she's wrong in some way. He only gave ground on one thing at the beginning. I don't agree with your critique, but I think it's a substantive one. He didn't elaborate on what he thought was substantive about it. He then went into this weird Q&A thing where he seems to want to know if she thinks that Christians are both being honest when they express their disbelief or their belief that there are no gods, or or if they have a legitimate reason for it, or if they're being truthful about claims that there is no evidence for God. Like, he's been in a couple of different directions. But she's being blamed by him for taking this in multiple different directions. And he hasn't even really been clear about the question. His question could be taken in many different ways. And he's not clearing, it's not getting any better.
It is. Your tone and everything makes it not desirable to have a conversation.
Fine. Are we gonna play the victim routine because you're a female?
It's not routine. Oh, wow.
Wow.
Oh,
is this the game you're gonna play?
Oh, wow.
I'm a little female, and Darth is being aggressive. No, I'm being assertive.
No, Darth.
Okay, there's a fine line between assertive and aggressive, and I think, obvious and clearly seen, that's a little slightly different, right? Assertive is a euphemism, right? Well, I'm not being aggressive. I'm being assertive. What about asking her about what was the comment? Oh, wow, you must be great on a blind date. Is that assertive, or is that passive aggressively, hostile? Right? That's just a weird dig. That's not you being assertive. That's you being a bitch. It had nothing to do with the conversation. She's being blamed for going off topic. What does her capability as a blind date partner have anything to do with the conversation that you're having? What does her being a female have anything to do with her complaining about the way you cut her off, and the tone of voice that you employ, and the oddball questions that you're asking? Your quote unquote assertiveness just seems like bullying, regardless of what the sex or gender of the individual is that you're talking to.
It's not being aggressive. It's being pleasant, brother.
A
desire to want to talk to someone.
I'm not picking up that you're being pleasant. I'm not picking up that you're being pleasant at all.
Well, maybe I should do better then. Maybe I should do better then.
Now,
what is that the only way he's going to pay attention to her? Like, it's not that she's been cordial through this whole thing, right? She's been assertive in the sense that she's pointed out when he has taken steps, he's gone off field, like the female comment and these other kinds of things, and cutting her off, right? But because she's been assertive, he's not under the impression that she's being pleasant. And now that justifies him treating her like a hostile witness in a bad bad legal show, or doubting her faith? Because that's really kind of where I think this is going, right? Like, ultimately, he's going to write her off as less than a good Christian, or maybe not a Christian at all.
Let's get back to the topic. Are atheists being truthful, and do they have a justification when they say there's no evidence for God?
So we've agreed we're not going to cut each other off. And I would say that I believe from their perspective, they think that they're being truthful. But I didn't ask you that. Oh, Darth, what happened to not cutting people off 5 minutes ago?
Cutting you off.
Like, literally.
Okay, she was trying to answer that question in both meanings. She was just trying right there. I think that they're honest when they're saying that they don't believe it. And then she was going to go on. She doesn't think that they have, she's not convinced that they're on the right path if they say there's no evidence for God or something like that. Not to put words in her mouth, but I'm pretty sure that's where she was going. So it sounded like to me she was trying to give a comprehensive answer, right, in two different senses to two different ways you could take the question. And Darth cut her off after the first. And she said, and he cut, no, you're not answering my question. That's because she's not done yet. This happens so often that Darth really should know better. Nope, you didn't answer. You didn't answer the one meaning that I needed. The question that you asked was not clear and it was not circumspect. You asked a vague horseshit question about a weird issue to another believer, and you're asking it in this vague way to fuck her up. That's why he's doing this. Because he can jump back and forth. I want to know if you think that they're right. I don't think that they're right. Do you think that they're honest when they say they don't believe? Yeah. Well, that's not what I asked. I want you to tell me if do you want to know if I think that they have good points, or do you want to know if I think they're being honest when they say they believe there's no God? Which one do you want to know? Answer that, define your question that way, and I'll answer it directly. But don't ask me this this weird, do you think they're being honest when they say this? Who the fuck cares? I'm going to assume that they're being honest if they're telling me what their stance is. Should I just assume they're a Poe? But that atheist that I spent an hour and a half with talking to on Clubhouse, turns out he's a Baptist minister. You wouldn't assume that, right? You're going to take people at their word for the sake of conversation. You don't know these people online. I mean, Darth has spent so much time talking with people on the internet that I think he's forgot that he's talking to humans. Or maybe, if this is the way he's always talked to humans, then it's not a surprise that he's a failure.
Again, you
But
are
Darth,
evading the question.
Darth, you have to let somebody complete the thought to make that assessment.
I will be glad to let you complete.
No,
the
you're not.
as long as
he's not even doing it now.
You don't let me.
No, you are being.
All right, Darth.
What the fuck is that? You do that to somebody on the street, and you're going to get hit with a car, right? I'm not advocating for that kind of violence. I'm just saying that this is where can you talk like this to somebody face to face and not not get punched in the face? You're gonna get slapped with a newspaper at the very least if you talk at somebody like this. Actually, I think if he was talking to somebody like this in the streets of New York, people would probably be looking around for the hidden camera, because they'd want to know, or they'd be wondering if there's a police officer or social worker nearby to guide this guy to the assistance that he desperately needs, right? One of the two. This is either someone pranking me and I'm on camera, or this is someone who has wandered away from a care home or facility or police custody and desperately needs to return to that state.
I genuinely think
you are not answering my question. Are atheists being truthful when they say there's no evidence for God?
Let me answer your question.
I'm saying, are they being truthful? And do they have a defense when they say there's no evidence for God? Answer that question, please.
Darth, I'm trying to answer your question, but you're not allowing me to answer it because you want to control my answer.
I'm not controlling your answer.
Okay, well then allow me to answer.
What I am going to do,
I will.
No, I kind of agree with her, and I kind of disagree with her here, right? This is about control, but it's not about controlling her answer. It's about him preserving the ability to say that she's wrong no matter what answer she gives. That's how Darth controls your answer. That's the trick. And the only way out of this for any Christians that end up in the same situation that Selah has ended up in, right, is to ask, what question do you want? What do you mean by that question? Are you asking me if I personally think that atheists are being honest when they say they're atheists? Or are you asking something else? You need to break that down, right? And if he then accuses you of being dishonest or chasing rabbit holes or going on tangents or any of this kind of stuff because you're forcing him to tighten up the question that he's asking, that's on him, right? You're going to get kicked no matter what. It's going to happen. There's no reason to accept 90% of the questions that Darth asks, the way he starts asking them, there's no reason to accept how they're framed most of the time. maybe even 95, 99% of the time, right? They almost always have to be rephrased in some way because the way that he set them up, this guy, when he's not on here doing this, trying to fuck people up, is probably stewing in his mom's basement, coming up, just having these arguments with himself, coming up with weird questions that don't really go anywhere, right? If he had genuine friends and was bouncing those ideas off them in real life, right, and had social skills, and some kind of like healthy emotional reactions, right, and he had just built up this weird shame cycle of crazy bullshit that he's got going on now, he might be disabused of some of at least the tactics, right? Like it's not going to convince him it's not going to somehow deconvert him from Christianity, right? But it could at the very least get him out of this tactic of talking to people like this. This guy has gotten like more dysfunctional every year that I've seen him online. He's getting slowly, consistently, and steadily worse. It's just watching this slow accident happen. And it's kind of sad because I really do think that if he had an actual social life with actual human beings, with real friends that cared about him and were willing and brave enough and willing enough and cared enough about him to correct him when he started going on these tangents, that might rein him in. But now Darth's an old crotchety guy who comes across as unhinged and, frankly, if he communicates this way in real life, maybe a little dangerous. You're not going to want to talk to that guy. You're not going to want to criticize him or disabuse him of any notions, right? He's old. He's set in his ways. You're just going to back away slowly, avoid making direct eye contact because he's foaming at the mouth a little bit, and, take off and hope that he doesn't ever find out where you live, right? That would be the kind of sensible move. That's the play.
Oh, okay. I will keep my mouth shut completely like it's super glued as long as you don't evade the question and scurry down a semi-related path.
Yeah, and this is what I hear you saying, Darth.
I'm talking, honey.
I will keep my mouth closed as long as you
okay, listen,
answer the
I don't
want
to have to. I don't want to have to kick you off because you see, you are a hypocrite. Because
Darth, at this point, I'd be fine if you do.
I'm going to mute you.
How is she being? Because she's being assertive, so she's being a hypocrite. That's a great accusation, Darth. That looks great.
Okay. Now, you are a hypocrite because you're telling me, "Oh, Darth, you're interrupting me. Oh, Darth, you're being controlling." I could go that sleazy route with you the way you're talking with me. I will ask the question, and let's see if you focus on the question. Are atheists being truthful, and do they have a justification when they assert there's no evidence for God?
I'll let you answer the question as long as you let me control your answer. That's what I hear, Doc.
I'm waiting for an answer. Sure. If you don't give me an answer...
Yeah, I totally agree here, Reckinator. He's escalating the artificial conflict. Yeah, there really wasn't any conflict here. She came in with that criticism, and he acknowledged it. He didn't agree with it, but he acknowledged that it was substantive. And that's as far as they've gotten as far as being congenial, right? And then it was like, okay, what translation do you like? I'm going to ask you this question, and you're not answering it. This is a problem. He's picking fights, right? We all know this. We all know that he's doing this. But now he's gotten so desperate and so walled off that he's just picking fights with Christians. He's finding something to be disagreeable about, right? But he's not the one being disagreeable. They are, because they're wrong. So he's justified in disagreeing with them because he's correcting them, because Darth is always right and everyone else is often incorrect. Not always. Like Tone Loc is often correct, right? But I'm sure when they've had disagreements and stuff in the past, Darth would probably concede to the fact that he may not have behaved well, or he may have said things that he shouldn't have. I don't know that he's ever said, when he's talked about disagreements that he's had with quote unquote friends on Clubhouse or Discord, that he's ever conceded to being wrong. And that's telling.
To answer the question as honestly as I can,
we're moving you from the realm.
Hey, listen, if you remove me, Darth, I'm okay with that at this point. Honestly.
20 seconds.
So I believe
20 seconds. Okay, let's count. Count it, people. Let's see if she gets to 20 seconds.
That they're being truthful in the way that they really are conveying what they think. But I think the text is saying that they don't have excuse. So I think that when they say that there is no evidence, that they're being truthful in what they think, but the text is saying that no, there is no evidence. There is evidence for God. So they think that when they say I think there's no evidence, that's what they really think. But the text is saying there is evidence. I think they're being truthful in that
So
they
who's
think
right?
there's no evidence. Well, of course, I think that there's evidence for God, because even the Bible
think
tells
they're truthful because they're guilty of self-deception?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
The self-deception thing.
Yeah, I think that they're being truthful in that they think that there's no evidence. But the Bible is telling you that there is evidence.
No. Okay, so you're saying they do have an excuse then?
So I find this weird, right? Sorry, I had to step away and turn off an alarm. How is she wrong here? Like, it sounds like she's in agreement. I mean, he's still looking for a reason to disagree with her and over something that makes no sense. I want to rewind that just a bit.
And that they think that there's no evidence. Well, of course, I think that there's evidence for God, because even the Bible
think
tells
they're
me.
truthful because they're guilty of self-deception?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
the self-deception thing.
Yeah, I think that they're being truthful in that they think that there's no evidence. But the Bible is telling you that there is evidence.
No. Okay, so you're saying they do have an excuse then?
I don't think that's what she said. They believe there's no evidence. She's saying that they're being truthful and that their belief is that there's no good evidence. Well, and actually that's not it. He's basically painting the broad brush of that. Well, all these atheists just say there's no evidence for God. Most people that I know that take the, try to get into like the evidence, and he's being dishonest, I think, about some of this, because there are evidentialists that will make the evidential arguments for God, the evidentialist apologetics. Most of the good refutations of that, or counter apologetics that I've heard, don't come from atheists that assert that there's no evidence for God, right? I mean, he hears that because he's constantly talking to people, I think, relatively new to the conversation, and they might be thinking, oh, yeah, well, there isn't any evidence for God, right? But that's not actually the case. There might be evidence for God. The issue is whether or not there's good evidence for God. But that's more of a nuanced conversation than Darth wants to have. And clearly he's not going to allow that, right? Because that's how he started off this conversation. You talk to any of these atheists, they'll say there's no evidence for God. And he keeps repeating that in the structure of this question. But now he seems to want to hang around Saylor's neck. Well, when you say that you think that they believe that there's no evidence, are you saying that gives them an excuse? This is a fucked up question. She's already stated that she thinks there is evidence for God. She's a Bible-believing Christian. A Young's literal translation Bible-believing Christian. So what's the point of doing this other than to chase something down a rabbit trail? Like, whether they have she thinks there's evidence. She believes them when they say they think there isn't, or there isn't good evidence. She believes that they're genuine in the faith, in the level of conviction that they're presenting to her. What does this have to do with whether or not they're justified in it? As a Christian, she's probably not going to agree with that. I think this is actually what's throwing her off, right? Like, are you asking me if they're lying? Like, I don't think they're lying about their belief, but I don't think that they're justified in their belief from a biblical perspective. It's that fucking simple, right? And Darth could be charitable and just say, is this what you're saying? Are you saying that you believe them when they say that their belief stance is that there's no God, but because you're a Bible-believing Christian and you acknowledge that the Bible is evidence of God, you don't think that they're entirely justified in that belief, right? Like, I don't know what he's trying to do here other than to confuse. Like, apparently the only way an atheist could know this is if it was proven to be 100% certain. It was a certitude that there is no God. Then you're justified in believing it. But that's an epistemological requirement that is not, well, it just doesn't exist.
No, am I saying that they have an excuse for...
Does Romans 1 say they have no excuse whatsoever?
Darth, when I look out my window and I see...
But Romans 1 says they don't have an excuse. It doesn't mean that they're lying about their belief stance. I still don't understand what Darth's fucking talking about here. Dolo Baggins writes, either way, if God gave us evidence in the form of a piss poor authored book, it's his fault if we don't believe. Possibly, right? But I think that the weirder thing is that it says in the book that he gives certain people over to a reprobate mind, or gives people's minds over to deceiving spirits. So you have references in there, and now there's lots of maneuvers that I've heard apologists take to explain how that's not actually, that's not God confusing you. That's not God trying to trick you or keep you away from him. That's not what's happening. It kind of sounds like that's what's happening given the language. But they have, all of a sudden, nuance is extremely important in making sure that we don't think God looks bad. God's not a deceiver. God would never lie to you. God wouldn't turn your mind over to deceiving spirits. He wouldn't just abandon you to a reprobate mind, even though that's what those verses say. That's not exactly what that means. But when Paul writes, everybody knows God, there's no excuse, Darth just takes that super literally. Oh, there it is right there. And we can take that to mean everybody has been revealed God, and it's specifically the Christian one. And if anybody says otherwise, they're lying to you. But that doesn't jive with Galatians, and it doesn't jive with those other statements saying that you can be given over to a deceived mind. The people that don't believe, right? Darth's attracted to Romans 1 like a lot of Christians are, because it gives them the idea, I think the mistaken impression, that what Paul's essentially writing there is that because these people refuse to believe, right, the suppression of truth and unrighteousness is something they're willfully doing themselves. They are solely responsible for their inability or their lack of belief, and therefore you can condemn them for it. But that's not entirely clear in every theological Christian perspective, right? Because you have other people that believe in something like determinism, right? The reason that these people are going to be like that is because grace has not affected their hearts yet. It is not, and if you believe in something close to irresistible grace, the Holy Spirit is going to work on their heart and bring them to that conversion. That's what's necessary. But Darth just acts like that's not, that for some strange reason, he acts like this isn't really a thing. He wants to hold an atheist. The reason that he uses this is because most atheists don't understand like theories of grace in Christian theology. So they're not going to bring this shit up with him, right? And if somebody tries, he's going to shout him down. Because I think he knows better. All you have to do to shut this shit up is start talking about grace. If Paul means this, then how do we have these different grace traditions? We have prevenient grace, we have irresistible grace, these kinds of notions in there. What does that mean when we talk about grace and the work of the Holy Spirit? Based on what Darth's saying, it sounds like it's a settled deal. You're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. It's because you're a stiff-necked people. You want to sin. You're making a conscious choice to deny God. You're doing it with your autonomous reasoning, which Darth claims isn't a thing, but you're doing it anyway. And it's your fault, and you will be condemned for it. How does that make sense? How is it that Darth saying that your belief in autonomous reasoning is the first sign that you're in trouble, but it's the first thing he condemns people for using? You have to use your autonomous reasoning to reach the same conclusions Darth is in order to get saved. And you can be condemned outright by loudmouths like Darth for using your autonomous reasoning for belligerently denying God, lying about him, because that's what you have to do per Romans 1. It sounds like he's banking a lot of his salvation story, his soteriology and his eschatology on the notion that you have autonomous reasoning and you're getting it wrong, and Darth's going to call you out for it.
Can you answer my question? Would you stop trying to be controlling?
Stop trying to control how I answer, Darth.
No,
Stop trying to control how I answer.
You keep on answering a question in a semi-related path. Does the Bible say they are without excuse?
Darth, I'm not going to let you control.
She's already answered this question.
The way that I want to answer. I'm sorry. So if you'd like to remove me,
you know what?
Do by all means.
You are as bad as they are. Goodbye. See you later. Okay. Wow. What a shocker. We have a so-called professing Christian who I wouldn't be surprised if she was an atheist troll.
See? It was all building up to him doubting her faith because she's disagreeable.
Trying to pretend to be a Christian. You see, when I interject when she's talking because she's simply not addressing the question and she's just going blah, 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 blah on a semi-related path. Oh, I'm the abuser. Darth is controlling. It's not that she's being abusive by purposely evading the question. Do you know how many times I ask people straightforward questions and they waste my time by not addressing the question, and then they go wah 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 wah, and then when I get done, if I don't interject after they've wasted my time, and I say, "You didn't address the question." Well, yes, I did. I did. Wah 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 wah. Okay. I said, "Are they being truthful?" And she goes, "Well, I think that they believe that." I didn't ask you.
But this is the problem, right? This, like, are they engaging in, are they being truthful in presenting their belief? Yes. Are they wrong about it is the question. I don't think that Selah thinks they're right. But you weren't asking that clear a question because you're an idiot, Darth. I hope you're watching this. You are an idiot. You are a shitty communicator, and you're a terrible conversation partner. You suck, and you're a misogynist creep.
I said, "Are they being truthful? Where do they grow people like that?" I strongly suspect that she was an atheist troll.
2 days later.
You know, it's interesting. I had how should I say, some verbal fisticuffs with another professing female Christianer. I think her name was Sela Vey or something like that. Does that name ring a bell?
Not to me, but other people.
I know who you're talking about.
And she was whining and complaining about, Darth Dawkins was mean to her, having complete amnesia about her own disposition toward me that provoked my response.
A few moments later.
Oh, speak of the devil, she's here in the audience. You know, when I was talking with Miss Selah, I pointed out
Selah. Isn't Selah, like, Jesus. So yeah, so in other rooms now he's running his mouth about how she's clearly I think she's an atheist. She's probably a troll. Now he's referring to her as in that last bit. I'm referring to her as a so-called professing Christian, right? Which in Darth speak is a liar, apostate, heretic, something like that.
They are without excuse. So when they continue to present themselves as being reasonable and rational in their unbelief, they're lying, every single one of them. How do I know?
They're lying about their rationale or their rationality. I don't understand this. If Paul's saying that people are denying truth and unrighteousness, that is a rationale. Right? If somebody comes around like, here's the reason that you won't acknowledge the existence of God, it's because you want to sin. Sure. I'm not convinced he's real, but also I don't want him to be real because I want to party all night and fornicate my brains out and whatever else that you think, right? Like life is just bumping rails and doing prostitutes, whatever else you could think of. Like, so what? Well, that you're being irrational. Irrational to what? Right? The issue is still going to be the person's belief stance, right? But would it be irrational for someone to read the Bible and reach the conclusion that they're convinced that God is real, but they hate him? Is that irrational? Darth would probably say, yeah, because you're reading the Bible wrong. That's not exactly what it says. You're not doing Bible right. Oh, okay. It clearly says that God's loving, but he's also just, and he'll come get you if you don't love him back. Like, yeah, I mean, it alludes to that in some places here and there, but I think that sounds like an ultimatum, so I hate him. I really do. I wonder like what God would do with somebody who was like a misotheist, right? Yeah, God's real, but I fucking hate him. Is that a misotheist? Am I thinking of an anti-theist? No, because an anti-theist believes that that idea of God is bad. I think a misotheist, believes that there could be deities, but hates them. I kind of wonder how he would approach that, like whether or not are you being rational in that? Yeah. Right? I read these stories and this thing sounds like a threat. right? You get that guy that's just like a Jack Reacher type, right? And I read those stories in the Old Testament, and I'm pretty sure my attitude about Yahweh, if he's real, if he bleeds, we can kill him, right? Like we got to get this thing, right? Well, that just seems irrational. Why is it irrational? It seems like a threat, right? Do what I say or else. I'm not living under that. Fuck that shit. That's going to drive me crazy. We need to take care of that. We need to take that out. Would Darth accuse them of being irrational? My guess is he would, right? Because you're supposed to be credulous enough to take all of the Bible in the Christian way, in the Christian reading of it and understanding of it, and just accept what it says and let that wash over you. And if you make that conclusion, then well, of course you need to conclude that God is real. It says it in the book he wrote. This is really all Darth's doing. It's very, very elementary and very, very sad. Like, what's your proof for this guy? What is your reason for believing in God? Well, there's evidence for him. And what evidence is that again? This book he wrote. How do you know he wrote it? He said he did. Right? Like, we're really getting back to that kind of elementarily bad take, that bad reasoning for it, right? And I'm trying to figure out, like, if you dig down deep enough, most of these guys, especially Darth, that is essentially what it is. There's the evidence for God is his special revelation, right? General revelation too, but that presupposes God, right? But you've got the Bible, which says he's real. And you know that the Bible is right when it says it's real, God is real, because it was written by that God himself. Cool. That's not good evidence in any way, shape, or form. So if your reason for believing in God is justified in that shoddy reasoning and that, or just your credulousness, I read this book, it says there's a God, there must be a God. I read that book and reached a different conclusion, that it was written by people and they just made up these claims about God. That's my reason. How is that irrational? You don't have proof that they made it up. You don't have proof that it's literally true. And then we get into evidentialism, right? And then that just takes forever, right? At the central part of that, but then Darth will take you down the rabbit trail of evidentialism or presuppositionalism, or you can't trust your autonomous thinking. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he is. You know that he's lying about autonomous reasoning because he can't hold it together in his head that he's blaming people for autonomous reasoning. And he's using Romans 1 to short circuit his own argument. You're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness consciously with your autonomous reasoning, and you're to blame for it. And I hate you, and God hates you, and he's going to get you. Darth has more or less said that verbatim without the autonomous reasoning part. He doesn't understand he's violating that part.
Know that? God says they are. They are without excuse. They are without a defense.
According to a schizophrenic fanatic in the first century. Sure. Paul wrote a lot of crazy things. And some of them don't line up with other things that he wrote. So, but some of that is to be taken into account, that there are, letters attributed to Paul that Paul didn't write.
In other words, there is no rational basis for their unbelief. None. I see somebody brought up Selah. What would you like to say, Selah?
Hi, everybody. I don't know if somebody asked me to come to the stage, just sent me an invite, and
that's actually true, Benghazi. I imagine Jeff wakes up ranting about his dreams. A little bit. It's happened before.
So I thought I would come on up.
Okay. Well, do you realize when you quoted Romans the other day, Paul was not revealing to them the unknown God, the statue?
Oh, you mean Acts,
that was,
right? Acts, right?
Excuse me. Yeah, I misspoke. Acts. Yeah, it's late and I'm tired.
Oh.
That when you quoted...
That's a reason. That's no excuse, Darth. Get it together.
The unknown God, Paul wasn't revealing to them the unknown God. That was the icing on the cake of the stupidity of the gods they believed in.
Except in Galatians chapter 4, verse 8, where he says, you did not know God. Right? That gives credence to the fact that what Paul was talking about in Romans was more to the point, more consistent with the notion that everybody believes in a God, or everybody believes in some creator, but not everybody gets the right one. That's kind of what I get out of Romans 1. Not this weird kind of like revealed epistemology, psychobabble, kind of like Freudian projection into it. Like, oh, you're just in denial about God, but everybody knows the Christian God's real. So it's all right in Romans 1. Yeah, but then you can read Galatians 4:8, where he says, you didn't know God before you knew him. You were slaves to these things. How does Darth account for that? If Paul is writing two different things there, then he's contradicting himself. Or if you want to reconcile what he's saying in Galatians with what he's saying in Romans, then Romans can't mean that. Because Galatians definitely means you didn't know God. It's right there. You didn't know God and you were slaves to these other people and these other things you thought were God. But in Romans 1, all of a sudden there's this thing that Darth thinks is like, well, here God's saying, no, Paul's writing that God's been revealed to everybody and they don't have an excuse. What I think most people take that to mean is that Paul is just saying everybody thinks there's a God. Everybody acknowledges that the world is a creation created by a creator. So they're without excuse. That's why they're without excuse. He lived in a world that was chock full of gods. He lived in the Greco-Roman Hellenized world, filled with Greek gods and Roman gods and the Jewish god Yahweh and any other tribute gods from any other territories that Rome happened to be part of, where they would set up their shrines, but you were allowed to have some of your other religions and stuff represented as well. Rome usually didn't wipe those out. Everybody had like a faith tradition, and I think that's what Paul was getting at. But Darth is just harping on this fundy take. Everybody knows, you know that there is one, and you're lying when you say it's not, right? Like, the thing is that this is a dangerous stance to take, because all you have to do is like, if that God necessarily exists, and it's necessary that his revelation is a part of his existence, then the idea that someone does not know God proves that God has not revealed himself to everyone, and therefore would defeat the notion that God necessarily exists in a necessarily revelatory way, I think. So I think that's what Darth's really kind of banking. And like, all chips are in on this necessary being and his necessary traits. One of them being that he's revealed himself to all. And so none are with excuse. And he's using Romans 1 to back this theological position. A theological position I don't think Paul held.
So you asked me a question. You said, do I know that? And you asked me a question. And this is where I think that you want me to respond. And I'm more than happy to do that. But I just want to make sure that I'll be able to speak without being overtalked or even cut off and things like that.
Are we going to play this game again? Because you were rude with me.
I think the replays are on.
Shouldn't you, if Darth thinks that she was being rude to him, don't you think it would be a good idea to establish at the beginning of a new conversation some firm guidelines and some rules? And I find this fascinating. This is more of Darth saying, like, well, we had a conversation before, and if you think it went badly, that's entirely on you. You were rude to me. You overtalked me. You interrupted me. You took diversions. You brought up unrelated topics. Like, no, Darth wasn't ever insulting. Darth never brought up things that were pointless, like the insults he used on her, the thinly veiled ones. Or the not so thinly veiled now that everybody knows what naked misogyny looks like, And thanks, Darth, for putting that on display in a very weird, on-the-nose, super cringy way. But it's all on her. If there's a benefit to the conversation, it's entirely to Darth's credit. If there was any negative that happened, it was someone else's fault. Darth only shits gold, and everyone else shows up there and they just don't understand the genius they're dealing with in their own time. They're squandering their time with Darth by obfuscating and prevaricating. Like, I mean, man, any Christians that are talking to this guy, and I'm looking at Ty there, who Ty might be parakeet. I get the feeling that he might be, but he seems like another one of these clingers. You're doing no one any favors talking to this guy. Like, Darth is not, he doesn't believe in fellowship. He doesn't demonstrate any of the fruits of the Holy Spirit. Like, he's not a fucking Christian. If you think that Christianity is real, then Christianity is supposed to manifest itself in genuine displays of the fruits of the Spirit, of which Darth manifests none. It's a very basic tenet of Christianity. You can know these people by what they do. And what does Darth do? He goes online and he complains and he bitches and he insults everyone, including other Christians, like Selah.
On Darth, and people can go and try to make that assessment for themselves.
I have a vivid memory of our interaction. Okay.
I don't doubt that. I'm sure it keeps him up at night.
I asked you a question. Does the scripture say that they are without a defense and excuse? And you ignored that, and you kept on going on about how, well, maybe they believe it's true. You recall?
Yeah.
I agree there, DeMarco. I don't know if Spatchy has a good grip on it, but wrath isn't one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit. Wrath is for God. Wrath is one of the 7 deadly sins. And granted, that's a later kind of theological take, kind of summarizing some of the deadlier sins. But wrath is for God alone. Wrath is left up to God's judgment. So yeah, I mean, he definitely gets the concept of it, but he's trying to channel it. And he's not channeling God's wrath. He's channeling his insecurity and his hate and his, the basic stuff, anger, fear, sadness at other people, and using his faith tradition as a conduit for it. And he's weaponized it against other believers, which is not surprising. I watched people do things very similar to this when I was coming up in different churches, when I was growing up. I've seen this dynamic in real life. Not this bad, because Darth has the benefit of anonymity and social media. That wasn't really a thing when I was coming up in church, but aspects of this would creep up all the time. These kinds of crazy personalities and these people who were clearly using their religion to prop up incredibly damaged, insufficient aspects of themselves, either interpersonally or publicly or whatever. It was being used as a crutch. And if it got threatened, you'd want to get away from that person quickly, because they were a time bomb.
I recall very well, and if people want to go back and listen to the replays, I think they're welcome to do that and make their own assessment on what happened.
So are unbelievers without excuse?
So if I'm gonna continue to have the conversation,
all right, you're not gonna. You listen. You're gonna keep on repeating
you
the same whining over
you
again.
want to control.
No, I don't want to control it. I want you to stop your whining and address the question. This is what
I want to control your emotional reactions and your statements. Yeah, no, I'm not being controlling. Wait for it. Darth isn't done playing the victim card until he's announced he's been pissed upon. Yeah, I wonder if he's actually accused other Christians of doing. Well, yeah, I think he did, right, with praise. But he probably doubts that praise is a Christian, no? So when apostates ask for proof of thine existence, thou shalt refer to them as stupid fat bitches, my child. yeah, that's that's a fruit of the Holy Spirit.
What happened the last time?
Or else I don't.
You know what?
With
You're doing exactly what you did the last time. I asked you a direct question, and now you're whining and complaining.
Darth, I'm not even starting the conversation.
Goodbye. Exactly. Hit the road. Wow. How'd you like to be married to that? She pulls the same crap.
How'd you like to be married to that? What the fuck does that have to do with it? I mean, this is the guy that complains about semi-related rabbit trails. What does her marriage status, have anything to do with what just happened? Jack shit. This guy is a fucking pig.
Perhaps she did last time. Okay. It's called play the victim card.
Ty laughing, also, Ty is a fucking pig.
Oh my goodness. Some of the things you say just kill me, dude.
I was dying to be honest.
I mean, misogyny is funny, am I right? I mean, you could just turn on a movie from the late 70s or early 80s, but, or even better, go back to the 50s. But no, fortunately, you guys have a live, living example of this antiquated fossil spouting this bullshit in here. How'd you like to be married to that one? She'd be a terrible wife of mine. What does that have to do with her talking about your last conversation? Ding dong. She didn't get past the point like, hey, if we're going to have a conversation, here are the parameters. And he's already like, well, no, you're not going to control me. I'm going to control you. I'm Darth here. This is how things work. Right? You get out of here, you crazy one. Why don't you go make a pie? Like, what the fuck? Like, Darth, I'm going to say something that you can understand, right? Because I'm sure you think that Selah is so aggressive and terse and shrill that she will never find a husband. She probably is already married. I'm sure Selah does not have a problem finding a mate or a partner, right? But Darth, your attitude, with that attitude, I'm just saying this because all of us have been talking, you will never get a girl, right? They're never going to go for you, right? Like you just, you know, you got the anger issues. You're scary, you know, and then you talk to women like that, right? Like, I mean, it'd be one thing if like they're into that kind of conservative social outlook too, right? But when you just dismiss a woman like that, that doesn't seem right. Even amongst conservatives, that does not seem right.
I couldn't.
No, I'll be honest with you. Okay, I don't like her. I think she's a little snot. Okay. In my very first encounter with her, she was snotty, and she was evasive. Right, and then when I pointed out her evasiveness, then she plays the victim card.
Yeah, I don't know that she was actually being evasive. I mean, she may have been, but a little bit. Well, I don't know about that. I think she was genuinely confused with where you were trying to go because she answered your questions several times. But when she would try to answer both the question in multiple, you know, in the multiple ways that some of those questions could be taken, you'd and I really do think he was pretending. He was pretending to be frustrated, right? Because now it sounds like, well, if there's an and or a but or an if that happens in your response, he can accuse that person of trying to like, oh, no, I don't want a nuance, right? Like, I mean, part of his original thing is just the yes or no kind of dichotomy. Tell me if this exists, or tell me if it doesn't exist, right? The idea that he was talking to her and giving her any kind of time to explain herself is kind of rare, I think, honestly, but still. Jeff, are you going to review the video with Ty calling Steph a demon hunter? Yes. I won't be doing that today, but I will be doing that one because that one, thank you for reminding me of that one. That one is fucked up.
Well, you notice how she referred to the replays instead of just defending herself right then and there. She insisted that people leave and go listen to a replay.
Didn't Darth bring up the fact of their previous conversation first, though? I mean, this replay is available. I'm pretty sure that was something that he brought up. And she's like, yeah, okay. Because he said our last interaction, like, yeah, you were rude to me in our last interaction, I think is how he put it. Something to that effect. And she's like, yeah, and that replay is available. I don't know what other better defense she could give. There's video evidence of how he behaved. And Ty's like, oh, well, that's interesting that she brought that up instead of defending herself. She doesn't have anything to defend herself about. She answered his questions. Well, she mostly answered his questions when he wasn't stomping all over the ends of her statements. And then and then putting on his performative fundy show of like, you know, claiming that she's dodging him or she's being evasive. Because he's chasing some fucking shadow in his mind about, like, you know, can atheists possibly be honest? No, I guess they can't, Darth. I guess they can't.
I find that this is a tactic for evasion as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ty's full of shit.
I hear it all the time when people are trying to slander someone. They say, oh, just listen to the replay, instead of actually defending themselves in the moment.
Defending themselves from their slander? What the fuck are you talking about, Ty? Ty is full of shit.
I'm a little female, and Darth is being aggressive.
So that's it, folks. Lordy, what a bucket of shit. So congratulations and thank you, and you're welcome, and I'm sorry. All of those sentiments, I guess, apply with this one. As Darth in pretty typical form, you know, Fruits of the Holy Spirit, my friends. Fruits of the Holy Spirit on full display from Darth, kissed on the dick by Jesus himself, Dawkins. So I think that we'll probably see more of their interactions later. I think Selah now lives rent-free in Darth Dawkins' head, and so she'll be back. And I just hope that Tom or Daz or some of these other guys will have the ability to capture that. So, I'm going to wrap that one up. Thank you for that reminder about the Ty and Steph stream, because that's a really weird one. It's a little bit more drama than I would get into, like Clubhouse kind of drama, but it's a weird interaction, and it's interesting because now that I saw it, I forgot that Ty makes that little appearance in this last bit. And yeah, there's something he does in that video other than his accusation. He accuses Steph of being a demon hunter, or accuses or says she's been accused of that of others, something like that. But the way he handles it is incredibly sleazy. So I'll cover that one a little bit, possibly tomorrow, if not sometime later in the week. So thank you, everybody, for the live chat, as usual. Thanks for the comments. Thank you for the super stickers and the super chats. I really appreciate it. You're all very welcome if you're thankful for the live chat. If not, I understand why. So we got through some more Darth Dawkins. Hopefully this didn't trigger anybody too bad. I haven't ruined anybody's day exposing anybody in any of this stuff. Yeah, exactly. Selah is welcome to tell her side here. Yeah, I wouldn't mind having a conversation with Selah. I don't know if she'd be interested in having a conversation with me. If anybody knows her from Clubhouse and wants to, because I don't get on there very often, and if she's in some of these rooms, Darth isn't the only one that has me blocked, so I might not ever cross paths with her. But if she finds out about this video or any of this coverage, I'm sure she'll find out about the Tom Rabbit video. Somebody will probably clue her in. I wouldn't mind talking to her about it if she's interested. If she's not, I totally get that too. Yeah, other than that, thank you again, everybody. As always, thanks to Tom Rabbit for providing the content. I don't know how he gets it. I don't ask questions, but I'm not going to complain that it keeps surfacing. So with that, I will bid you all. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, or a great evening, or a happy Sunday if you're getting closer to that, depending on where you are. Take care, and we will see you all next time.